Well, good afternoon. My name's Martin Elsey, and this is my hand. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of What's on the Bench. And today we're going to be again looking at vintage amps, just one that I've just restored. And today we're going to be looking at a Dallas Rangemaster, and I think we've got the popular model here. Hard to tell. Spec-wise, it lines up exactly against this handsome brochure that I have from the time, which describes, the description is exactly the same as this amp, but it's called it a popular here. So I don't know if we just had the badge drop off the front here, or if if it's a kind of precursor to it. I don't know. Anyway, this is great. This brochure. It's more of a technical description than an actual, the kind of flash pow, send instantly like slash sort of type brochures that you get these days. What's it say? Compactness to give the maximum performance. Push-pull circuit using to full effect the following valves: EF86, one ECC83 and two ECL86s, and a bridge metal rectifier. And he went for 26 guineas. I don't know what that means. I've never really understood guineas. Anyway, made by the Dallas Arbiter company. I don't really know that much about the company. I'm not really into that kind of company history type stuff and all the thousands of different models. I'm more interested in how the amps actually work, if you know what I mean. Anyway, gives us 10 to 12 watts output. I'd say that's probably a bit conservative. I'd probably say we're probably up around about 15, something like that. Quite a powerful little beast. Great tone. So let's have a look at it anyway. I've got it. I've got the chassis out here at the moment because I've been repairing it, obviously. So what have we got? Here's that EF86 in here. The ubiquitous ECC83 just there for preamp. That EF86 is basically forming the preamp, sorry, not the preamp, the LFO, low frequency oscillator for the tremolo circuit. And then we've got these two ECL 86s here at the output, push-pull, yeah. Those valves, they're quite interesting. Obviously, these are the kind of oddballs, I guess we'd say, in the pack compared to what we're used to on a modern amp, on a modern valve amp. An amp of this size, you'd probably have 6V6s in there or EL84s. But these valves are very commonplace in the mid 60s because they were used in valve radio sets. So there have been loads of them about, and they'd have been very cheap. Not so these days. Obviously, they're not manufactured anymore, and they're quite rare. So that these were quite expensive to get hold of. Anyway, so it sounds great. What was wrong with it? Well, when it came in, it had this. It's very low powered. It's given maybe a tenth of the power it should be given, and when you hit the strings hard, it made this sort of kind of fizzy crackling noise. The tremolo wasn't really working worth a damn. Also, it made this loud cracking noise when you turned it on. As it gradually warmed up, you'd hear this sort of very loud cracking noise that wasn't actually coming from the speakers. So that was a little bit of a worry. So anyway, getting down to the bottom of it, it turned out this loud cracking noise came from the big smoothing capacitor you can see in there, the so-called death cap. The aptly named death cap, I should say. We've probably got about 300, 400 volts sitting on the top of that. That needed replacing, basically. There was arcing going on inside. The big voltages was arcing across the can and causing this loud cracking noise. Obviously, that's just flipping dangerous, as well as not working properly, and a sign that the capacitor is no longer doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that's been replaced, and I've left it in there, but I've fitted in some capacitors, some of the modern equivalents underneath, which are a good deal smaller than the big old caps that they fitted during the day. So it kind of preserves the look, but if you're into that sort of thing, it's got good modern equivalents in there. So that cured the spitting and this cracking noise. The horrible thin low power sound, most of the problem there was that one of these, this is actually the replacement, but there's a polypropylene cap that links the output of one stage of the ECC83 to the next stage of the ECC83, and that had broken down and just crumbled away to nothing virtually. So that's been replaced. All the electrolytics in it have been replaced as well, because they were on the way out. I mean, so you know, it's a 53-year-old amplifier. You know, they need replacing. That got us so far, but still didn't have full power. It turned out that one of these valves, one of the ECC83s, was shot. One of the ECL 86s was shot. So replaced a pair of them, so we got a match, and that cured that. We're up at full power, and then the tremolo, I adjusted some componentry in the tremolo circuit a bit, and replaced the EF 86 in there, and bam, we were back in action, looking good and sounding good. So yeah, there's a few things. There's a lot I like about it. I love the tone. There's one thing that they have done a bit on the cheap here, to be honest, and that's the fact that one thing I don't like about it, it makes it kind of a very noisy amp, is the fact that if you notice here, I don't want to get too close, this is the main switch just here, so we've got the mains on there. The input from your actual inputs here, your guitar or whatever, goes straight to the volume controls. Okay, so all the volume adjustment is done at the very front end of the amp. Now, I'm not crazy about that, and it's quite unorthodox even for an amp of this time. Normally what you do is you go through a valve stage, or basically an amplifier stage, at least one first, then you go to your volume controls and your tone controls, and that means that you keep the hum, and you keep the hiss, the white noise hiss, low. It means you can adjust that with the volume control. If you have your volume control first, then it means that all the noise that's introduced by the different amp stages and all the componentry in here, okay, that just goes straight to the speaker, with, you know, as if you're on full volume all the time. So you can have a low signal coming in. You can adjust your signal from the front panel, you know, your guitar sound or whatever like that, and that will go up and down, lovely. But the noise, the inherent noise within the amplifier itself, okay, always goes at full volume to the speakers. And as I say, that's unorthodox. If you look here at this, for instance, I'm not sure how much you can see here, but I've got a Westminster, this is a Watkins Dominator circuit from the time, and you can see here's their ECC 83 in here, and you can see here's the input, we go through that first, and then we actually go through two stages of the ECC 83. We go through a tremolo unit, and then we're on to our volume and tone controls. So we've got substantial amplification before we get to those the tone and the volume controls. That means we can keep the noise, we can control the noise inherent in this part of the circuit with our volume controls. So I don't know if that kind of makes sense. It's all to do with signal to noise. So you can see here I've got it all wired up to this oscilloscope over here. I thought what would be quite useful is, or what might be of interest, as we've got this thing out on the bench, is I don't know if you hear people talk about sag with amplifiers. This idea that if you with valve amps in particular, you can get this effect where when you punch a chord on your guitar and you've got these amps running quite loud, the voltage going into the valves sort of droops down and then rises up. Effectively what it means is kind of like a sort of compression. that you get with valve amps. It's not anything specific about the valves, it's the way a valve amp is actually designed that causes this. Effectively, you don't have voltage regulators on valve amps. Well, they're not traditionally designed in that way anyway. Certainly, none in my experience are anyway. And what you have is you come from the step-up transformer. You go through a rectifier of some sort, be it valve or be it semiconductor, and then you go to a series of smoothing circuits, including a smoothing capacitor and a resistor, basically the filter network. And they kind of smooth all the ripple and mains hum off the top. But what it does leave you is this effect that when you punch as I say, a cord, the voltage that goes to the kind of feed, if you like, of the anodes of all of the valves droops down, and it creates a kind of compression. You see it go down, and then as your cord or whatever dies away, it starts to sort of swell. It basically increases. The gain increases. What it is a kind of power compression. When you hit the string, the power gain droops down a little bit and then gradually increases as the voltage goes up. And I just thought it might be a good opportunity to actually see that in action. So I've got my guitar on here. If you look over here, you can see I've got my oscilloscope, and I've got this little multimeter on here as well. I don't know if you can see that. We've got about 184 volts on there at the moment. Over here on the oscilloscope screen, that you can see that each of these divisions is about 10 volts. Okay, and I've got it set so that we're just looking at this same voltage. They're both looking at the same point, this sort of danger point coming off of one of the death caps within the amp. And what we're going to see here, if I hit a chord here, we'll see this droop down, and you'll see this sort of sag actually in action. And stop this thing from waggling around too much. And let's just try hitting the strings, see what's it. Something like that anyway. So yeah, you get the idea. So that's sag in action. So I thought you'd find that interesting to look at. Alright, well, I'm going to get the lid back on this amp now, I think, and we'll give it a bit of a proper run up. I'll show you the controls, and we'll see you in a while, okay? Alright, take care. We've now got the Rangemaster back in its enclosure, and it's ready for turning on. And so let's flick it on. In terms of controls on the amp, we've got a master switch and volume, a main switch and volume control here, 2 inputs, independent volume for each, tone control, fully adjustable tone control I might add. And then this tremolo here. Tremolo's on at the moment. Let's turn the tremolo off. As you can hear, it's not the quietest amp in the world, and it stays at that volume independent of where you have the volume control, as I was talking about earlier. But tone is everything with this little amp, and it does have a great tone. So let's plug it in and see what we got. Okay, so I've got a Les Paul that I'm going to use here. Plug in. So about a third of the way up there, I guess, yeah. So you get this lovely starting to break up kind of English Townsendy type sound. Turn it about 2/3 of the way up. We're really starting to get some crunch now. If you turn it flat out, then we're kind of into that real sort of blues breakery type territory. Real thick, you know, tone. Yeah, so a great tone from this little amp. Loud. It's got two Goodman's speakers inside it, which you probably saw earlier. I've been repairing it for a lovely chap by the name of Charlie Dinsdale. Thanks to Charlie for letting me do this little film on the amp. Tremolo. We haven't talked about tremolo all the time, have we? So let's just turn the volume down a bit. Toe at its lowest setting. Full up. It's a tone control. So what can you say? Tremolo. Asserted tremolo in the world, but nonetheless it's a tremolo. That's it with it turned full up. Turn it right down. Little bit of FM rock for you there. Yeah, great little amp. It's just real nice, but what you need to do is just turn it flat out. Thanks for joining us anyway, and we'll see you again for another next time. We'll see you again next time for another What's on the Bench. Can't see no future, can't see no sky. Legs feel so heavy, so is my head. Wish I was a baby, wish I was dead, etc. Thanks everybody, take care, and we'll see you again next time. Bye bye.